Bats. Science writing by Mary K. Carson. Background. Austin, Texas is home to millions of bats. It's also home to Bat Conservation International, BCI, an organization that works to conserve the world's bats and the environments where they live. In this excerpt from The Bat Scientists, nature writer Mary K. Carson introduces Barbara French, a bat biologist who worked as science officer at BCI for 15 years. She now rescues and rehabilitates bats in Texas. Barbara cares for a half dozen or so different kinds of bats, including orphaned red bat babies, injured Mexican free-tailed bats, recuperating evening bats and yellow bats, captive straw-colored fruit bats, and an elderly cave bat. They're representatives of just a few of the world's 1,000-plus bat species. Bats live on every continent except Antarctica. They come in all sizes, from small as a hummingbird to as big as an owl. More than 1/5 of all 5,000 or so mammal species are bats. Flight is what makes bats unique. They became the only truly flying mammal more than 50 million years ago. The secret is their wings. Bat wings are made of naked skin over a framework of bones, the same bones we have. Barbara gently unfolds the wings of a Mexican free-tailed bat. There's her elbow and her wrist, says Barbara, as she touches the bones visible through the wing's thin skin. And her thumb, she continues, pointing to all the small nub halfway down the top of the wing. Bats are master flyers. Their flapping wings propel them forward with speed and maneuver them around trees, after insects, and into crevices. When a bat can't fly, it's in trouble. Many of Barbara's bat patients have broken or hurt wings. The wing injuries can be often treated, says Barbara. She sometimes does bat surgery, putting pins in the broken bones. Finger injuries will heal well, but when the upper arm is much harder, says Barbara. Only bats that can fly and catch insects on their own are released back into the wild. Outside the bat barn is a big flight cage where recuperating bats exercise and can catch bugs. When and if they can feed themselves, Barbara releases them back into the wild. Those that can't make it on their own become bat ambassadors, traveling with Barbara to events that teach people the truths about bats. Bats are unique among mammals in other ways besides flight. In general, the bigger the mammal, the longer it lives. An elephant might live 70 years, a dog 15 years, or a hamster only 2 years. Bats break this rule. Even small bats can live for 40 or more years. For their size, bats are the longest-lived mammals on Earth. Bats also reproduce slowly for their size. A mouse might have dozens of babies per year. Most kinds of bats give birth only once a year to a single pup. One lost bat baby is a lost generation, says Barbara. While the bat babies get milk, most adults in the bat barn eat live mealworms. They are live beetle larvae, says Barbara. I order 80,000 mealworms a month. Most North American bats are insect eaters. They have mouths full of sharp teeth to quickly crunch up insects as they fly. Each of the 1,000 different kinds of bats is especially adapted to particular food it eats. Fruit-eating bats have big eyes and powerful noses to see and smell the ripe tropical fruit available year-round. Nectar-eating bats also live in warm places with year-round flowers. They have long noses and tongues to reach deep into flowers and slurp up nectar. There are bats that snag fish with their strong clawed feet, bats that catch birds in midair, and even bats that ambush mice on the ground. The infamous vampire bats of Central and South America drink the blood of mammals and birds. Most bats do their eating at night. They are nocturnal animals. So how do bats manage to fly around and find their food in the dark? Many fruit-eating bats have extra big eyes, just like other nocturnal creatures. The African straw-colored fruit bats that Barbara cares for have dog-like faces. The reason these kinds of bats are often called the flying foxes. They depend on their eyesight and sense of smell to find fruit, Barbara explains. Insect-eating bats are different. Hearing is the most important for them, says Barbara. They can also smell and see, but echolocation is the biggest part of finding their food. These bats get around and hunt in the dark by seeing with sound. Echolocation means locating something with echoes. Like sonar, it's a way to get information about something by bouncing sound off it. Echolocating bats make loud calls and then listen for the echoes. The reflected sounds carry information about the distance, speed, density, and size. A bat's brain turns the information into kind of a picture that helps the night-flying bat avoid trees, zero in on prey, and speed through caves. An echolocating bat sees its surroundings, caves, telephone poles, other bats, birds, and its prey, with sound. Bat echolocation is so precise that a bat can find a moth, tell how big it is, and know in which direction and at what speed it's moving, all in complete darkness. And it gathers all this information quickly enough to catch the moth while flying through a forest. It's why echolocators have such large ears, explains Barbara. Their big, sensitive ears collect the echoes like tiny satellite dishes. The strange faces of many bats are also echolocation tools. Those wrinkly lips, an ear, leaf-shaped snouts called nose leafs, and the bumpy foreheads focus the calls and echoes. Some bats even shout their calls through their megaphone-like nose. Bats are the loudest flying animal around. Their short calls or shouts are as loud as a smoke detector. Luckily for us, those echolocation calls are ultrasonic, too high-pitched for humans to hear. So what is all the plainly heard chatter about inside Barbara's bat barn? They're communicating, explains Barbara. Besides using ultrasonic calls to echolocate, bats use audible chirps, trills, buzzes, clicks, and purrs to talk to one another. What do they talk about? The normal stuff: food, friends, mates, territory, and complaints. The most talkative bats seem to be those that live in big colonies. Think of a mother bat coming home to Bracken Bat Cave after a night of hunting bugs. How does she find her pup among the millions of bats? One way she zeroes in on her baby is by calling to it, and then the pup calls back to her. Barbara and the other scientists have identified more than 20 different calls in Mexican free-tailed bats. Many were first discovered from studying the recorded conversations among the colony of 50 or so free-tailed bats in Barbara's barn. They may even use a sort of grammar, says Barbara. They put all those little clicks and buzzes and trills together in a certain ways to make certain meanings. The fact that the bats communicate with a complex language adds to what scientists are learning about these marvelous and misunderstood mammals. Though many people once scorned them as flying vermin, we know now that bats are intelligent, social, long-lived creatures more closely related to monkeys than mice. And no matter where they live or what they eat, each bat species plays an important role in its ecosystem. Bats are important controllers of insects. Fruit bats pollinate plants and spread seeds that grow forests. Cave-dwelling bats and their guano they make support hundreds of unique cave species of insects, fungi, and bacteria found nowhere else.